Talk guys, welcome to the channel. Without fucking let's go for more news, but first don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. To galvanize voters, the Biden administration must reject half-step on marijuana reform. During the 2020 presidential campaign, then-candidate Joe Biden repeatedly pledged to decriminalize marijuana and automatically expunge marijuana records, identifying these issues as barriers to racial equity. As we lead into the 2024 election, President Biden still hasn't fulfilled that promise. Instead, Biden is pushing watered-down marijuana reform and nice-sounding rhetoric in hopes of reaching more voters, particularly Black, Latinx, and young voters. 67% of young voters are dissatisfied with the candidates in the upcoming presidential election according to CNN, and nearly 1 in 5 Black voters who voted for Biden in 2020 say they are uncertain about him in 2024, according to a Washington Ipsos poll. These same voting blocs overwhelmingly support marijuana legalization. But here's the truth, rescheduling marijuana to Schedule 3, as Biden's DEA is proposing, would maintain federal criminalization. Currently, marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug in the Controlled Substances Act, CSA, the most restrictive category. A shift to Schedule 3 would symbolically acknowledge that marijuana has a relatively low risk for abuse and medical value. But in effect, the proposed change would keep federal penalties for marijuana in place and would benefit businesses rather than those harmed by marijuana criminalization. Rescheduling would provide tax benefits for marijuana companies, but people imprisoned for marijuana would not be released, have their criminal records erased, or have access to federal benefits restored. Parents could still have their children taken away for marijuana violations. Immigrants could still be deported for marijuana use or working at a dispensary. Workers in marijuana industries would still lack critical federal protections. Research on state-regulated cannabis products would continue to face limitations under Schedule 3. While marijuana laws have shifted at the state level in a relatively short time, people across the country carry the collateral consequences of marijuana records and the looming threat of federal criminalization with them every day. Our current patchwork of marijuana laws leaves glaring holes through which tens of thousands of people fall each year, most of them poor, Black, Latinx, or Indigenous. Your aging aunt might have a tin of THC-infused gummies on her bedside table to soothe her arthritis, but she could be charged with a federal felony for growing cannabis plants in her garden. The cafe downtown might offer CBD-infused cold brew, but a worker at that same cafe could be banned from receiving SNAP benefits to buy food because of a past marijuana conviction. Eliminating these glaring contradictions between our state and federal laws is not radical. Federal legislation to deschedule marijuana is necessary to bring our federal laws up to speed with state-based reforms. Biden needs to fulfill his promise to voters to decriminalize marijuana. Decriminalizing marijuana at the federal level by descheduling it or removing it from the Controlled Substances Act, CSA, is necessary to end future federal criminal penalties. But to address past convictions and the other ramifications of prohibition, Congress must act. The CAOA would not only federally decriminalize marijuana and automatically expunge federal marijuana records, but would create a regulatory framework rooted in social equity that prioritizes public health, upholds states' rights, protects workplace safety, creates economic opportunities for small businesses, and addresses the harms of the failed war on drugs. Biden can also take executive action in support of expanded pardons and commutations, protection of state marijuana programs, and directing federal agencies to stop punishing people for marijuana use. It was Vice President Harris herself that said when it comes to marijuana reform, this is no time for half-steppin'. This is no time for incrementalism. For years, our friends and families have grown cynical from being promised transformative change and then being offered more of the same. It's going to take more than half-step-in to get our communities to the polls. Biden has the power to urge his administration and Congress to federally decriminalize marijuana, end punishments associated with marijuana criminalization, and begin the process of creating a federal regulatory framework that prioritizes public health and reinvests in people. Actions like this would show Black, brown, and young voters that he is someone who takes their concerns, their values, and their votes seriously. Why Biden wants to block the Nippon U.S. Steel deal. The pending sale of U.S. Steel, a century-old icon of American industry, to its Japanese rival Nippon Steel has presented a challenge to President Joe Biden's friendshoring foreign policy. Biden's opposition to the deal risks undercutting his administration's efforts to strengthen U.S. alliances and supply chains, experts say. At the end of 2023, Nippon Steel agreed to buy Pittsburgh-based U.S. Steel for $14.1 billion, a 40% premium on its December stock price. U.S. Steel's shareholders approved the sale in April 2024, but the transaction's closing has been delayed amid regulatory scrutiny and opposition from lawmakers and the United Steelworkers Union, USW. Analysts say the deal could revitalize U.S. Steel, once the world's largest steel producer and corporation. The company began to decline along with the broader American steel industry in the 1970s as foreign firms, including Nippon, began to produce the material at a far lower cost. Between 1970 and 1987, American steel production declined 35%, while global steel production grew 21%. If the Nippon acquisition proceeds, the combined firm would become the third-largest steel-producing company in the world, giving it more control over the crucial input in industries that Washington is seeking to bolster, such as electric vehicle manufacturing. Nippon is currently fourth, U.S. Steel is 27th. The deal could result in lower prices for U.S. buyers, and serve as an example of friendshoring, a strategy that involves building supply chains with allies. Nippon executives argue that the deal would create a firm more equipped to compete with Chinese companies, which dominate steel production. What's the opposition? The deal faces resistance from the politically influential Steelworkers Union, as well as Biden, former President Donald Trump, and a bevy of other lawmakers. USW President David McCall, whose union represents half of U.S. Steel employees, opposes the deal because he says Nippon could enact significant layoffs for union workers. They haven't indicated in any way that they're interested in working with us to assure us that our members and our members' futures, their employment security, their economic security, and their retirement security is guaranteed, he told Bloomberg in March. In a fact sheet released in December, U.S. Steel said Nippon has the financial wherewithal and desire to honor all existing agreements with the USW. Analysts say that union members' votes will play a pivotal role in battleground states during the 2024 election. Trump narrowly won Pennsylvania in 2016, and Biden won the state similarly in 2020. Both presidential candidates have voiced opposition to the deal. Biden has thrown his support behind the USW and said that U.S. Steel should remain American-owned. Trump has said he would halt the deal instantaneously, citing the need to protect the U.S. steel industry. Meanwhile, a bipartisan group of lawmakers has raised concerns that Nippon Steel's operations in China make the acquisition a threat to U.S. national security. Led by senators from steel-producing states in the Midwest, these lawmakers point to Nippon's partnerships with firms linked to the Chinese Communist Party as especially concerning. Senator Sherrod Brown, DOH, who is running a tight re-election campaign, was among the first lawmakers to publicly oppose the deal. Nippon says that these accusations are based on significant inaccuracies and misrepresentations, and argues that the acquisition would strengthen U.S. national security by forming a stronger competitor against Chinese firms. Nippon and U.S. Steel are seeking review by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS, an executive branch, interagency panel that scrutinizes proposed transactions involving U.S. and foreign businesses to see whether they raise national security concerns. CFIUS reviews can take months. They culminate in a recommendation to the president, who is sole authority in preventing transactions. To do so, the president must conclude that there is credible evidence of a national security threat. Between the creation of CFIUS in 1975 and 2018, presidents blocked foreign investment transactions just 5 times. However, in many other cases, companies have agreed to scrap or alter merger plans after CFIUS alerted them that it would likely recommend a block. This includes Nippon, which in 1983 abandoned plans to buy the metals unit of another Pittsburgh-based company, Allegheny International, over concerns about potential CFIUS intervention. Skeptics of the threat posed by the deal, including CFR senior fellow Edward Alden, argue that the acquisition of a U.S. firm by a close ally does not raise obvious security risks. Under the committee's statutory analytical framework, Nippon Steel's acquisition of U.S. Steel poses no national security risk to the U.S., writes Thomas P. Fetto, a lawyer who ran the CFIUS process under Trump. Other observers point out that the lawmakers leading the anti-deal charge benefit from union support and face tough re-election contests. Both companies expect to close the transaction in the fourth quarter of this year, potentially after the November election. The CFIUS review of the deal could extend into 2025, however, the president is authorized to unwind completed mergers if they were not previously approved by CFIUS. How is the challenge at odds with Biden's other stated goals? Biden has sought to elevate economic relationships with U.S. allies, particularly fellow Group of Seven, G7, member Japan and other countries in East Asia. Critics argue that his opposition to a merger with a Japanese firm raises questions about Washington's commitment to allies and its openness to foreign investment. If Washington won't allow this transaction, involving a buyer from a G7 country, then what foreign buyer would it see as a permissible owner, asks Sarah Bowerly-Dansman, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Some experts note that blocking the transaction would represent a major departure from CFIUS's typical remit, which has historically focused more narrowly on national security. Donald Trump accused of echoing Nazi Germany with Truth Social video. President Joe Biden's campaign accused Donald Trump of echoing Nazi Germany with a video that was shared on the former president's account on his Truth Social platform Monday. The 30-second clip imagined newspaper articles reporting on a landslide Trump 2024 election win. One referred to the creation of a unified Reich under the headline of "What's Next for America?" Reich is nowadays mostly used to refer to the Third Reich description that Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler gave to Germany during his despotic rule. Biden's campaign wrote on X, formerly Twitter, that the video foreshadowed a second Trump term. In a statement shared with multiple media outlets, Trump's campaign spokesperson Caroline Leavitt said it was not a campaign video but created by a random account and reposted by a staffer who clearly did not see the word while Trump was attending his ongoing hush money trial in New York. The Trump account's post of the video appeared to be removed on Tuesday morning. The presumptive GOP nominee has been accused of invoking Nazi-like rhetoric before. He has claimed undocumented immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, reportedly praised Hitler during World War I commemorations in France, and hosted Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes at his Mar-a-Lago home. The 2024 election is heating up, and women's rights, health care, voting rights, and the very future of democracy are all at stake. Donald Trump will face Joe Biden in the most consequential vote of our time. And HuffPost will be there, covering every twist and turn. America's future hangs in the balance. Would you consider contributing to support our journalism and keep it free for all during this critical season? HuffPost believes news should be accessible to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay for it. We rely on readers like you to help fund our work. Any contribution you can make, even as little as $2, goes directly towards supporting the impactful journalism that we will continue to produce this year. Thank you for being part of our story. And you, viewer? What did you think of the Trump situation? Leave your opinion in the comments.